My name is Lisa Morrison, and I'm 35 years old. The night my sister called me screaming those four words, "Don't come home," I was sitting in a hotel room in Chicago. It's 200 miles away from the life I thought I knew. Completely unaware that the man I'd been married to for 7 years was orchestrating the end of it all. But not in the way I'd feared. In a way I never could have imagined. Let me back up. This story doesn't start with that frantic phone call. It starts in the waiting room of Dr. Patricia Sinclair's office, where I sat clutching my coffee 3 weeks earlier, waiting for results I was terrified to receive. I'd been having symptoms for 8 months. Small things at first, fatigue that didn't improve with sleep, headaches that wouldn't quit, a persistent low-grade fever that came and went like an unwelcome guest. I'd seen 2 doctors who'd run standard tests and found nothing. "You're fine," they assured me. "Maybe you're just stressed." But I wasn't fine. I could feel it. I could feel something wrong in my body, something the tests couldn't capture, something that had begun to rewrite my days into cycles of suffering. I couldn't explain to anyone who wasn't living inside my skin. Dr. Sinclair was my third opinion. She'd actually listened to me, not just the symptoms, but the fear underneath them, the certainty that something was profoundly wrong. She'd ordered extensive testing, and now I was here waiting for the results that would either validate my terror or make me question my sanity entirely. Lisa. Dr. Sinclair appeared in the doorway, her expression neutral, the expression doctors learn to wear when bearing bad news. My stomach bottomed out. "Come on back." The diagnosis was Lyme disease. Late stage, complex, with complications. The spirochete bacteria had been replicating in my system for nearly a year, damaging tissues and joints along the way. I'd need aggressive treatment, months of antibiotics, possibly longer. There could be permanent effects. The timeline for recovery was uncertain. Some people recovered. Some didn't. Some improved for a while, then relapsed. It was, Dr. Sinclair said gently, a disease with no guaranteed outcome. I nodded. I asked questions. I took notes. I did all the things you're supposed to do when your life is being reorganized by medical terminology. But inside, I was screaming. That night, I told my husband, David. We'd been married 7 years, together for 10. He was a software developer, successful and driven, the kind of man who solved problems by working harder. He was also the kind of man who didn't know how to live with problems that couldn't be solved through effort alone. God, he said when I told him, "Then how serious is it? Like, will you need surgery? It's antibiotics. Lots of them. For months, at least. Months." "That's okay. Okay, we can handle that." But I could see it in his face, the recalculation happening. The way my diagnosis was already being filed into the problems that complicate the plan category of his mind. The months that followed were brutal. The antibiotics made me sicker before they made me better. I lost 20 pounds. I couldn't work. I'd been a project manager at a marketing firm, a job that required energy and presence I no longer possessed. We put me on medical leave. Our savings got tighter. The future became uncertain in ways that terrified us both. David tried to be supportive. He brought me water. He made dinner on nights he got home from work before 8 p.m. He didn't complain when I had to cancel plans or when I spent entire weekends in bed. But there was a brittleness to his care, a sense that he was tolerating my illness rather than adapting to it. Our conversations became functional logistics of medical appointments, insurance questions, updates on symptoms. We stopped talking about anything else. Sex dried up. Not because we didn't want 2 IDs. Dead. Sometimes, but because I was exhausted and he was resentful, though he never said so. He didn't have to. I could read it in the sighs when I couldn't climb the stairs without resting halfway, in the tightness around his mouth when another medication caused side effects, in the way he'd stop looking at me like I was his wife and started looking at me like I was a project that wasn't going to plan. After 6 months of treatment, I started to improve, slowly, incrementally. Some days were better than others. I could go an hour without needing to rest. Then 2 hours. My brain fog began to lift. The fevers came less frequently. I was beginning to believe I might recover when David started getting calls. They came at night, usually between 10 p.m. and midnight. He'd check his phone and excuse himself to the porch or garage, his voice dropping to near silence. Yeah, I'd hear him say, "No, she doesn't know." Pause. I can't talk about this right now. Should have confronted him. I should have asked who was calling, what he couldn't talk about. But I was still fragile, still processing my own trauma. Still trying to rebuild a body that felt like an apartment after an earthquake standing, but not quite structurally sound. I didn't have the energy for drama. Besides, I already knew who it was. The pattern was distinct. The calls came from Jasmine, David's ex-girlfriend from college. They dated for 3 years before breaking up amicably, or so David had told me. They'd stayed friends, which I'd accepted because David said it was important to him and because I hadn't wanted to be that wife who monitored her husband's friendships. I'd even met Jasmine once at a work function. She was pretty accomplished, and she'd been nothing but cordial to me. But she'd also looked at David with a familiarity that went beyond friendship, a knowledge of him that predated our entire relationship, and it had made me inexplicably angry. When I'd mentioned this to David, he'd laughed. "You're being paranoid. Jasmine's happily married. She lives 3 states away. There's nothing to worry about. 3 states away." But calling my husband at 11 p.m. while I slept? Their conversations punctuated by my husband saying she doesn't know. I didn't confront him. I just kept track. The calls came twice a week, then 3 times a week. Text notifications appeared that he'd delete before I could see them. He started going to the gym at odd hours, which he'd never done before. He was vague about work in a way he'd never been, using words like client meetings and project updates that seemed designed to end conversation rather than start it. After 8 months of treatment, I was declared clinically improved. Not cured. Lyme disease doesn't work that way, but functional. Well enough to return to work part-time. Well enough to have my life back, or at least a version of it. I went back to the office. I started making plans again. I started to hope, and David pulled further away. 3 weeks after I returned to work, the conference happened. It was a marketing industry conference in Chicago, the kind I'd normally have skipped. But my boss had insisted I attend. It would be good for me, he said, to get back into the professional community after being away. I'd asked David if he minded. He'd been supportive, in that hollow way he'd mastered. "Go," he'd said. "You deserve to do something for yourself." I didn't recognize at the time that he'd seemed almost eager for me to leave. The conference ran Thursday to Saturday. I was there for all 3 days. The first 2 were fine keynotes, breakout sessions, networking dinners where I reestablished myself in professional circles that had moved forward without me. On Saturday night, the final dinner was happening at a rooftop restaurant, and I was exhausted. I went back to my hotel room around 8 p.m. That's when my sister called. Sarah is 3 years younger than me. We'd always been close, the kind of sisters who knew each other's secrets. She was brilliant and sharp-tongued and somehow always knew when something was wrong in my life before I fully admitted it to myself. "Hey," I answered, lying on the hotel bed in my underwear and a t-shirt, watching mindless television. "Are you drunk?" she asked instead of greeting. "What? No. Why?" "Because I need to tell you something. And I need you to understand that I'm telling you this because I love you and I cannot let you go home tomorrow without knowing." My heart went still. "What happened? Where's David?" "At home, I assume." "Why?" "Sarah, you're scaring me, okay? So I ran into Marcus. You remember Marcus from David's work? At the grocery store about an hour ago. We got coffee after because we hadn't seen each other in years. And he mentioned something about David, about a party tonight at David's office." "A party, Lisa, okay?" I didn't understand. "He's having a party. Not just a party. He rented a limo. He's having people over." And Marcus said. Sarah's voice dropped. "Marcus said David told him the party was to celebrate. To celebrate that Lisa's coming home from the conference. So he's throwing me a welcome home party. Lisa, He said it differently. He said David told the group that he was celebrating that his wife was better now, and her health was turning around and he could finally have his life back. He said David was talking about this like it was a major milestone, like you recovering from a serious illness was a good thing for him. My chest felt tight. That's not the weird part, Sarah continued. Marcus said he mentioned Jasmine was there. Jasmine, David's ex-girlfriend. That Jasmine. She drove all the way from 3 states away for a party at your house tonight. The room tilted. I didn't speak for a long moment. There's more, Sarah said gently. Marcus said they were all talking. And at some point David was very drunk and very loud. And he actually said this. Lisa, he said he was finally going to take his life back and that Jasmine had been waiting for the timing to be right. And Marcus thought it was weird enough that he pulled me aside to warn me. And I'm telling you this so you can... I need to get home, I said. No, you listen to me. Don't go home right now. If Jasmine's there, if this is what I think it is, you walking in on that is going to destroy you. I'm driving to Chicago right now. It's about 4 hours. I'm coming to get you, and we're going to figure out what the hell is happening before you see him. But I was already moving. I hung up the phone, threw my clothes in my suitcase, and checked out of the hotel in a haze of adrenaline and dread. The drive home was 3 hours. I did it in 2 hours and 40 minutes. The streets of my neighborhood were quiet when I pulled up to my house. The house I'd helped choose, that we'd renovated together, that was supposed to be ours. I could see lights on inside. Could see movement behind the living room, curtains, multiple silhouettes. People I recognized from David's work. I sat in my car for a long moment, afraid to move, afraid to see what came next. Then I got out and walked to the door. I used my key and noted with a small, sharp pain that there was no reason I shouldn't. This was my house and stepped inside. The noise hit me first. Music, laughter, the clink of glasses. The living room was full of people. David's colleagues. His friends. Jasmine, who had her hand on David's arm. A banner strung across the living room that read New Beginnings in glittery letters. Everyone stopped when they saw me. Lisa? David's voice, shock and something else, guilt, fear, coloring his tone. He stepped away from Jasmine immediately. You're home. I thought you were at the conference, someone said. You said you were at the conference, someone else added. I was, I said quietly. I was, but I got a call that made me leave early. David's face went pale. What's happening? I asked him. My voice sounded very small. Nothing. We were celebrating new beginnings. I pointed to the banner. Is that what we're calling this? It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Because what I think is that you were having a party with your ex-girlfriend while I was out of town. And you've been having secret phone calls with her for months. And you told everyone here that you were celebrating getting your life back? The room was absolutely silent now. Lisa, can we talk about this in private? David asked, his voice strained. Actually, no. I want to know what new beginnings means. Everyone here can apparently listen to you celebrate whatever this is. I think I deserve the same courtesy. It's not an ending, Jasmine said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. She looked embarrassed and defiant in equal measure. And I know how this looks. But it's not what you think. Don't, I said to her. Then to David, explain. David took a breath. He looked like a man about to jump off a cliff. I've been in love with Jasmine for a long time, he said. The words landed like stones. When you got sick, I thought I could push those feelings away. I thought I could just be a good husband and support you, and eventually I'd stop. He stopped, but I didn't. And Jasmine has always felt the same way, and we were both married. You were married, I said flatly. Yes, I was married to you. And she was married to someone who didn't appreciate what she was worth. And when she got divorced last year, she called me, and we started talking. And I should have told you. I should have been honest. But I was scared of what? Of me finding out you were in love with your ex-girlfriend? Of you leaving while you were still sick? of you being alone while you were dealing with all that pain and fear. I couldn't be the one to cause you more pain. So I just pretended and hoped you'd get better and maybe I could figure out how to tell you. By throwing a party celebrating new beginnings. My voice was sharp enough to cut. By trying to talk to you, he said, his voice rising. I've been trying to work up the courage to have this conversation for months. I was going to tell you tomorrow. I was going to sit you down and explain everything and ask you what you wanted to do next. What I wanted? I heard my own laugh, brittle and broken. What I want is for you to explain to me how you justify spending months in secret contact with your ex-girlfriend while your actual wife is fighting a serious illness. How you justify calling me paranoid when I was sensing something was wrong. How you justify throwing a new beginnings party while you're still married to me. I was going to ask you for a divorce, David said quietly. Tomorrow. I was. And Jasmine's been waiting, but she's also been trying to be respectful of our marriage. She said we needed to end things properly before you, what? Ran off together? Before we saw where things could go between us. I looked around the room. Everyone was staring at their shoes, their drinks, anywhere but at me. I recognized the expressions, sympathy, mixed with relief that it wasn't them. The universal relief people feel when witnessing someone else's disaster. I need you all to leave, I said quietly. Lisa, David started. Not you. Everyone else. Out. There was shuffling. Mumbled apologies. People filed past me toward the door. When Jasmine reached me, I didn't move. She had to edge around me, and she smelled like David's cologne, which somehow made everything worse. When they were gone, just David and me and the terrible banner that still hung across my living room, I sat down on the couch. When were you going to tell me? I asked. Tomorrow. I meant it. I was going to tell you tomorrow, but not tonight. Tonight was a mistake. Marcus wasn't supposed to. It was just supposed to be a small thing. Just my close friends. To help me work up the courage, a party to celebrate the end of my marriage is your way of working up courage. I didn't. It was stupid. I know it was stupid. I just needed to talk to people who understood. Who could tell me I wasn't a monster for being in love with your ex-girlfriend while married to me. For being in love with two people. The words hung between us like smoke. You can't love two people, I said. I know that now. I know I have to choose. And I choose, don't. I held up my hand. Please don't tell me you choose her. I can't hear that tonight. But I need you to understand that I'm not abandoning you because you got sick. I love you. I've always loved you. This is about something else entirely. It's about loving your ex-girlfriend more. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Sarah called when I didn't respond to her texts. Are you okay? Did you drive back? He was having an affair, I said when she answered. Not physically, I heard her say. The words careful, emotionally, romantically, spiritually. Does it matter? No, God, Lisa, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? I'm in my house sitting under a banner that says New Beginnings while my husband tells me he's in love with two people. And he was going to ask me for a divorce tomorrow. So no, I'm not okay. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then, okay. Do you want me to come get you? We can go to a hotel. You shouldn't be there tonight. I looked at David, who was standing across the room, looking simultaneously guilty and relieved. The relief probably because I wasn't screaming or throwing things. Probably because some part of him had expected worse. Yeah, I said to Sarah. Yeah. Come get me. While I waited for my sister to arrive, I walked through my house. The kitchen where we'd made dinner for each other when we were happy. The bedroom where the thought made me sick. The office where David had been taking his private calls to Jasmine. I found my photo album, the physical one, we kept on the shelf, and I opened it. Our wedding day. Us at the beach the year we were married. Christmas 3 years ago, both of us laughing at something ridiculous. Life as it was supposed to be. Then I closed it and put it back. Sarah. Arrived at 11:30 p.m. She took one look at my face and didn't ask questions. Just held me while I cried harder than I'd cried in months, harder than I'd cried when I was diagnosed with Lyme disease. Harder than I'd cried during the treatment when I thought I might not recover. This was a different kind of loss, not of my body's health, but of my marriage, of my future as I'd imagined it, of the man I'd trusted. We drove to a hotel. Sarah booked a room with 2 queen beds. We sat on our separate beds for hours, and I told her everything. The phone calls, the vague meetings, the way David had pulled away, the small ways he'd made it clear he resented my illness. He was waiting, I said at some point. He was waiting for me to get better. And as soon as I did, he was going to leave me. Or, Sarah said carefully, his feelings didn't develop because you were sick. They developed despite it. And now that you're better, he can actually act on them. That's not better. No, it's not. We didn't sleep. We talked until dawn, and then Sarah made coffee from the hotel's terrible coffee maker. And we talked more. By the time the sun came up, I'd made some decisions. The first was that I was going to hire a divorce lawyer. The second was that I was going to get tested for STS, because if David was emotionally involved with Jasmine, I had no way of knowing if it had become physical. The third was that I was going to take back my life in a way I hadn't since I got sick. I called my boss from the hotel room. I need to take the rest of the week off, I said, and I'm going to need some time to figure out my work situation. I'm dealing with a personal matter. He didn't ask questions. Everyone could hear something in my voice that afternoon. I called a divorce attorney named Rachel Chen. She was sharp and kind, and she listened to my story without judgment. You have grounds for divorce, she said. Emotional infidelity, depending on your state. Might not factor in legally, but it can affect custody arrangements and asset division if those become factors. Do you have children? No, that simplifies things. How long have you been married? 7 years. Okay? I'll need financial information, bank accounts, property ownership, investments, and we'll need to file paperwork. Has your husband been served divorce papers before? Not by me. Then this might be a shock. Are you safe at home? I'm not going back to my home, I said. Not right away. Not until I figure out what happens next. That's wise. I spent the next week in a hotel with my sister. I went to a clinic and got tested for STIs negative. Thank God. I met with my divorce attorney multiple times. I opened a separate bank account and moved half of my liquid savings into it. I contacted my mortgage lender to understand my options. I started documenting everything: the party, the calls, the texts. All of it. And I started telling people, not everyone. I didn't want to turn myself into a victim in need of public support, but close friends, my mother, my cousins, the people who loved me and who I'd need to support me through the next months. Everyone had the same initial reaction: shock, followed by anger on my behalf, followed by a kind of grim determination to see me through it. You're going to be okay, my mother kept saying. You survived Lyme disease. You're going to survive this. I wasn't sure that was true. Lyme disease was an external enemy. This was an internal one. The man I'd trusted to have my back when my body was failing me had actually been busy creating an escape route for himself. On day 7, I went back to the house. David was at work. I packed a suitcase with clothes that felt like me, not the compromised version of me I'd become, but the version of me I wanted to be going forward. Bold colors. Clothes that moved. Clothes that felt like possibility. I also packed some things I needed: my birth certificate, medical records, financial statements, the photo album, my grandmother's jewelry, and then I packed a box of David's things. His favorite sweater, his watch, the photo of him and his parents from last Christmas, his college ring. I wanted him to see that I wasn't erasing him from my life, not yet. Anyway, but I was clearly setting him apart from it. I put the box on his pillow with a note. The divorce papers are coming. We need to talk about the house and our financial accounts. Please contact my attorney. I need you to understand that I'm not angry. I'm clear, and I'm done. I left the keys on the kitchen counter, his house, his keys, his future with Jasmine waiting, and I walked away. The divorce took 4 months to finalize. David, to his credit, didn't fight me on much. He signed the papers quickly. He admitted to the emotional affair. He agreed to let me keep the house and the majority of our savings because, he said, he didn't want to make this harder than it already was. Rachel said that made me very lucky many divorces became ugly battles. Ours was almost civilized. Almost, Rachel emphasized. During those 4 months, I did a lot of work on myself. I went back to therapy, the same Dr. Chen I'd been seeing for my Lyme disease. I talked about the betrayal, about the way David's infidelity had somehow felt worse than the disease because at least the disease was impersonal. At least it wasn't a choice. He chose her, I said once, sitting in Dr. Chen's office. When I was at my most vulnerable, he was already checked out. Already thinking about someone else. Yes, Dr. Chen said, and that's devastating. But Lisa, I want you to notice something. You survived the disease. You're surviving the betrayal. You have an incredible capacity for resilience. I don't feel resilient. I feel broken. Resilience isn't feeling strong all the time. It's breaking and then continuing anyway. It's being devastated and then waking up the next day. It's trusting when you've been betrayed. It's loving again after being hurt. I don't know if I can trust again. You don't have to decide that today. You just have to survive today. Tomorrow, you'll decide again. After the divorce was finalized, I didn't see David or Jasmine again for 2 years. Then one day, I got a letter. It was from David, sent to my office address, so I knew it was deliberate. The letter was long, several pages. He wrote about the years we'd spent together, about the good parts he wanted me to remember, about how much pain his choices had caused me, and how he'd had to do a lot of work to understand that his feelings didn't justify his actions. He wrote about his relationship with Jasmine, which apparently was going surprisingly well. They were living together. They were talking about marriage. He'd changed jobs to a company closer to her family. I'm not writing this to upset you, he'd written. I'm writing this because I needed you to know that I'm sorry. Genuinely sorry, not just for getting caught, but for what I did to you when you were suffering. You didn't deserve that. I read the letter 3 times. I cried. Then I called Rachel, my divorce attorney, who'd become something like a friend. He sent me a letter. I said, a threatening letter. Do you need to file something? No, an apology letter. Rachel was quiet. Then, how do you feel about that? I don't know. I'm angry that it took him 2 years. I'm angry that I had to suffer so much because he was a coward. I'm angry that he gets to have his happy ending with Jasmine while I'm still picking up the pieces. But I also think maybe I'm ready to let it go. To let him go. Not for him. For me? I didn't respond to David's letter. But I did decide something. I was going to reclaim my life completely. Not in spite of everything I'd lost, the marriage, the future as I'd imagined it, the trust, but because of it. Because I'd survived disease and betrayal, and I was damn well going to make sure I came out the other side as someone I respected. I quit my job, the one that had sent me to Chicago, and inadvertently started the chain of events that led to my discovery and took a position at a nonprofit focused on health advocacy. I wanted to help people navigate serious diagnoses. I wanted to be a voice for the people who felt like their bodies were betraying them, because I'd been there. I started dating again. Not immediately, not for 1.5 years, but eventually, I was careful. I chose people who were kind and honest, okay, and who could tolerate my occasional bad days when the Lyme disease symptoms flared up again. I went on dates where the men were generous and thoughtful, and I learned that there were good people in the world. That trust could be rebuilt. I also reconnected with the parts of myself I'd lost. I went to Thailand, then Peru, then Greece. I took a pottery class. I learned to play guitar badly. I got a tattoo on my wrist of a small circle, which represented infinity and renewal according to the artist, but represented to me I survived and I'm whole according to me. 2 years after the divorce was finalized, Sarah asked me, "Do you regret going back to Chicago that day? If you'd stayed for the conference? If you'd come home the next day, maybe you wouldn't have found out about the party." I would have found out something, I said. David said he was going to tell me. And even if he hadn't, even if we'd gone on for years with him harboring feelings for Jasmine, eventually the truth would have come out. This way, at least I got to have a choice in how it ended. Do you still love him? No, I said. And I meant it. I love who I thought he was. But I don't love who he actually is. And the funny thing is, I think I love myself more than I ever did when I was married to him. Sarah smiled. That's everything. I didn't see David again after that day. We finalized the divorce, split our possessions, and went our separate ways. He and Jasmine got married a year after the divorce was finalized. I found out through Facebook. I looked at their wedding photos. They looked happy, genuinely happy, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not resentment, just a kind of neutral acceptance that this was his life. And mine was something completely different now. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't destroy you unless you let it. It can devastate you. It can make you question everything about yourself and your judgment and your capacity for love. But it doesn't have to define your future. You get to decide what comes next. Don't come home. My sister had pleaded that night, trying to protect me from the worst. But I did come home, and I found my husband in a new beginning celebration that had nothing to do with me. And that terrible night became the pivot point that sent me in a different direction entirely. I came home to find myself. I came home and realized that the marriage that had seemed so permanent was actually fragile. I came home and learned that sometimes the people we love most can hurt us in ways we never imagined. And I came home and decided that I was going to spend the rest of my life choosing people and circumstances and versions of myself that were honest and true. That's what I discovered that night. Not just what my husband was planning, but what I was planning to a new life, a better one. One where I wasn't a supporting character in someone else's story, but the main character in my own.